Standing at the window, I observed the car pulling into the driveway, turning right, and disappearing into the street. I questioned why I wasn't more upset, having just witnessed 10 years of my life slip away. Wasn't there supposed to be more than a shrug and a casual acknowledgement that I should go take care of the dripping faucet? Turning towards the kitchen, I mentally replayed the events of the last half hour. Returning from work, I found my wife, Peggy, seated at the kitchen table with a full glass of wine. I sensed something was amiss right away. Firstly, she was home before me, a departure from her usual schedule of arriving half an hour to an hour after me. Secondly, there was nothing on the stove. Finally, a glass of wine, a rare choice for Peg. No sooner had I entered the room than she asked me to sit down, revealing she had something to say. Grabbing a beer from the refrigerator, I settled across from her. Peg told me she had noticed a disconnection between us in the last 6 months. Uncertain about the cause, she expressed her concern about our drifting apart. Despite attempting to discuss it, all she heard was that we were going through a rough time, and things would improve. Peg then informed me of her decision to initiate a break, emphasizing it wasn't about divorce, just a temporary separation. She felt the need for space to reflect on her life and understand the reasons behind our relationship strain, encouraging me to do the same. In response, I tried to downplay the severity of the situation, urging Peg not to view it as that bad. Acknowledging our problems, I emphasized that every marriage faced challenges. I expressed my belief that we couldn't solve these issues by being apart and not communicating. Peg informed me that talking wouldn't resolve our issues, emphasizing that I only perceived one problem in our marriage, the lack of closeness. According to her, my proposed solution was too simplistic, merely involving her getting undressed and allowing me to do as I pleased. Peg asserted that there was more to our problems. We no longer made love or snuggled, and she couldn't explain why. Despite still loving me as much as the day we got married, something was wrong, and she needed space to figure it out. She clarified that she didn't want to throw 10 years of marriage away, but believed that time apart might help. Peg had already packed her belongings and planned to stay with her sister until finding her own place, promising to call me weekly to stay in touch. As she prepared to leave, mentioning her commitment to marry, she departed without a goodbye kiss. Her actions spoke volumes, revealing the depth of our situation. It didn't take long for word to spread that Peggy and I had broken up. Most of our friends sympathized and tried their best to cheer me up. Peggy would call me once a week and ask how I was feeling, and I'd say I was doing fine. And then I'd ask how she was feeling, and she'd say she was fine. Then I'd ask her if she was ready to come home, and she'd say, "Not yet." 6 weeks into Peg's absence, unsettling rumors surfaced, hinting at her having a boyfriend. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to believe that it was just like she said, that she just needed some time alone to get her thoughts in order, and then she'd come home. I kept hearing different things, so I decided to check out the rumors. I would find out where Peg was staying, do a little investigation, and put an end to the rumors. But no one could tell me where she was staying. Either couldn't or wouldn't. And I began to sense that something in the situation was extremely suspicious. I dined with my friend Tom, and his wife Tanya shared my concerns, inadvertently revealing that I planned to hire a private investigator to locate Peg and verify the rumors. I observed Tom exchanging a glance with Tanya, and she subtly nodded. Tom advised me to save my money, confirming the accuracy of the rumors, but refusing to disclose further details. In response to my inquiry about Peggy leaving me for someone named Adam White, Tom explained that Adam worked with Peggy, and she had indeed left me for him. I expressed confusion, questioning why she didn't simply get a divorce instead of opting for separation. Tom countered by highlighting Peg's meticulous planning, suggesting that she had been dating Adam for almost a year and likely had contingency plans in place. According to him, Peg might have organized the separation so she could return home if things didn't work out with Adam. Feeling frustrated with the lack of information from my supposed friends, I stood up, tossed my napkin on the table, and declared that I would walk myself before leaving. On the way home, I pondered what I had just discovered. No closeness with Peg for over a year because she refused to be with me. No closeness for over a year because she rejected my touch. And all the while, she pretended everything was fine. I stayed at home, played the good boy, and waited for the unfaithful truth. All my friends knew, yet they let me sit there and wait. The waiting was over. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with the cordless detective agency and provided them with an advance. I informed them of Peg and her boyfriend's workplace, instructing them to gather all possible information. Then I went home and created a list of tasks to end my relationship with Peg. I mentioned that I would wait for the detective report, intending to have the list and be prepared once it was available. After completing the list, I leaned back in my chair and contemplated another issue. I acknowledged that it had been almost 16 months without any closeness due to Peg's rejection, and decided that now that I knew the reason, I wouldn't remain celibate any longer. Sitting at the kitchen table, sipping a beer and planning to end the long dry spell, I recalled Tom's words about Peg's meticulous planning. Knowing her well, I realized she had plans for my reaction and how to use it against me in the divorce. The list I made was useless. She could predict my response. A new list took shape, requiring immediate action and strategies to turn the tables on Peg. The next morning, I went to the bank to deposit my check. While there, I checked the safe Peg and I shared. The register showed Peg regularly checking it weekly. I noticed she was watching me, ready to respond at the first sign that I was on to her. I pondered that for a moment. Afterward, I removed the 5 certificates of deposit from the plastic envelopes, went upstairs, and used the bank's copy machine to duplicate all 5. Subsequently, I placed the copies back in the envelopes within the box. Unless Peg took the discs out of the envelopes to check them, she would never know about the switch. Knowing that Peg was keeping tabs on me, I casually took my passport out of the box and mentioned carelessly to the woman at the bank, as she returned the box, that I was going to Mexico for a fishing trip. I walked out of the bank with 5 CDs in my pocket. My visits to the bank averaged 2 times a week. During each visit, I cashed in 1 CD, paid an early withdrawal fee, and then stashed the cash when I got home. Lacking faith in credit cards due to their potential pitfalls, I held an American Express card in my name, where the full balance is settled with the bill, along with several gasoline company credit cards and 1 Visa card with a low limit. In contrast, Peg possessed a good half-dozen credit cards in her name, some with high limits. Monthly, I paid the bills, compiled a list of the balances, and set it aside. I compiled a list of desired items, then went online. Over the next 2 weeks, I initiated spending on Peg's credit cards. My intention was to leave her with substantial credit card debt upon my departure. I upgraded my computer, acquired a new Dell with all the accessories, purchased a Remington 700 on eBay, and obtained other items like a digital camera and a modern phone with various features. The house belonged to Peg, inherited from her parents, so I had no legal claim to it. Nevertheless, we used it as collateral for an open line of credit. Timing it right, I could draw from the line before she realized. Previously questioning why, during our trial separation, she left me in her house instead of asking me to leave, I now understood that being in the house implied I was eagerly awaiting her return. I viewed the separation as temporary from her perspective. Subsequently, I closed my 401(k) at work, paid the penalty, and saved the money. I leaned back in my chair and awaited the private investigator's report. The only challenge was how to discreetly conclude it without attracting attention. To avoid surveillance, I decided to plan weekend fishing trips. She was aware of my fondness for fishing and the catches I brought home, making it unlikely for her to hire a private investigator to follow me. After all, wasn't I a fool? Hadn't she been playing with my mind for over a year? On a Friday, just before leaving work, I received a call from Tanya, urging me to stop by their place. Despite attempting to decline, she insisted it was crucial, so I agreed to visit. Upon arrival, Tanya welcomed me and led me into the living room, where Tom was seated in a soft armchair. He stood up, extended his hand for a shake, and motioned for me to relax while he fetched a beer. Tom informed me that Tanya needed to talk to me, assuring me that he agreed completely with what she was going to say. After he left for the kitchen, Tanya indicated that I would need some beer. When Tom returned, he handed me a Bud Light, mentioned that he had things to do and wouldn't be back until midnight, and then left through the front door. With the door closing as the signal, Tanya began to speak. She acknowledged that I overheard their conversation the night I ran away from them, expressing regret for any hurt caused. Tanya explained that they genuinely liked me and didn't intend to hurt me. Complicating matters, she revealed that she and Peg were also friends. Tanya admitted they hoped Peg would return home to me, acknowledging my love for her. They had kept quiet, believing that if we were together again, forgiveness and forgetting wouldn't be an issue. Tanya considered this their apology and revealed it was only part of the reason they wanted me to stop by. Knowing my character, Tanya stated that they believed I wouldn't cheat on my wife, comparing it to my aversion to robbing a bank. Then she caught me off guard with a question about the duration since I last had closeness. I observed her attire for the first time, a deep-cut blouse showing ample cleavage, a short skirt, and high heels revealing attractive legs. Despite our friendship, I couldn't help but be physically affected. Remembering Tom's earlier comment, I began to suspect where the conversation was heading. In a subdued tone, I disclosed that it had been a year and a half. Tanya leaned toward me, and as she hoarsely expressed her desire to change that, I couldn't help but notice her provocative attire. I explained to Tanya that I couldn't proceed with the suggested arrangement, considering Tom's friendship. As I attempted to stand up, she firmly grabbed my arm and pulled me back down. Tanya reassured me that Tom was aware of the situation and had left to provide us with privacy. She clarified that it wasn't a pity or mercy gesture, but rather a decision they had been discussing for months. Tanya explained that Tom was infertile, and they wanted a baby, expressing the hope that I could help them while they assisted me. Stunned, I sat there in a daze, trying to comprehend her proposal. When I finally found my voice, I expressed confusion, questioning why they had chosen me. Tanya emphasized their desire for a known donor who would be involved in the child's life, suggesting that I would play the role of the godfather, always there for the baby like an uncle. I struggled to grasp the logic of her proposition, but Tanya insisted that they had thought it through. She presented scenarios where I might be needed, either for emotional support or even as a potential organ donor in critical situations. Tanya asserted that they wanted me to be part of their family. Despite my reservations, she shifted the conversation, questioning whether I found her attractive. Tanya squeezed the lump in my pants, interpreting it as a positive reaction. She then knelt down, unzipped my pants, and explained the advantages of being the father of her child, highlighting the need for frequent lovemaking to ensure pregnancy. Tanya assured me that she wouldn't limit our encounters to her most fertile days, and suggested that we proceed to the bedroom for what she referred to as serious procreation. After kissing Tanya once more, I prepared to leave. As she escorted me to the door, she expressed gratitude for what had just transpired. Tanya mentioned her desire to continue such encounters daily until she became pregnant. However, she acknowledged that Tom was accustomed to more frequent closeness, about 3 or 4 times a week. Despite Tom being fine with us seeing each other, she didn't want to offend him. Tanya requested that I call her the next day to make plans for the future. All the way home, I thought about what had just happened, and as I pulled into the driveway, it occurred to me that if Peg was watching me, she would find out about my visits to Tom and Tanya, and notice that Tom had left and I had stayed a few more hours. The next morning, I called Tanya and explained my thoughts to her, but she told me not to worry because Tom had not left. He had gone down to his basement workshop and stayed there until I left. This information got me thinking. It was one thing to make love to Tanya when Tom was gone, but could I do it if I knew he was in the house? Tanya must have known what I was thinking because she said, "Don't worry, Rob. Everything will be fine, I promise." That same day, I got a call from Tom, inviting me to have a drink with him after work. It was a bit awkward. Try sitting down with a guy you've known for 20 years, who's a good friend, and whose wife you just had a consensual night with. He must have known what I was thinking, so he got right to the point. Tom acknowledged the awkwardness of the situation and expressed the need to discuss it. He affirmed his complete agreement with what had transpired between Tanya and me. Tom disclosed that Tanya hadn't revealed the full truth and admitted that he was impotent, unable to engage in intimate activity for over a year. He explained that Tanya's passionate behavior the previous night was an attempt to compensate for his inability, and her concern for not wanting to hurt him was a cover for the truth. Tom contrasted Tanya's consideration for his feelings with Peg's selfishness, noting how Tanya put him first, even in challenging circumstances. Tom shared that Tanya's sensuality was a challenge for him, and despite her efforts to cope, She was inevitably going to seek satisfaction elsewhere. He understood her love for him, but recognized the impossibility of maintaining their relationship if she were to cheat behind his back. Tom revealed the dilemma he faced. While he could comprehend the reasons for potential infidelity, he couldn't tolerate the dishonesty that would come with it. Tom said that only solution, as far as him could see, was to handle it openly. However, Tanya wasn't the type to agree to take a lover openly while him sat in the living room. She could probably do it with a stranger in a motel room, but not with him around. They needed someone steady, someone we both loved and felt comfortable with. After considering various candidates and not reaching an agreement, they kept coming back to me. There was concern that if they started with me and Peg came back, it would stop, and they would have to start over. Tom expressed confidence that Peg would eventually return, given that everyone who knew Adam White considered him an unpleasant person. He believed Peg would realize that soon enough and come back to me, convinced that I was oblivious to her actions. I chuckled because Tom seemed to understand me well. The prolonged separation made me sense that something was wrong, and now I knew it. According to Tom, Peg was history, even if she didn't know it yet. He was confident that I wouldn't take her back under any circumstances, freeing Tanya and him to approach me. They wanted to have a baby, and Tanya needed a physical relationship. Until doctors could identify and resolve Tom's issue, they needed someone else to fulfill that role for Tanya. Tom acknowledged that it might sound peculiar, but he believed that me being intimate with his wife would, in fact, save his marriage. He wanted me to get used to the idea that he knew about it, and there was nothing wrong with him. I was left speechless, finding the situation so unusual that it was difficult to comprehend. Tom, after staring into his glass, turned his gaze to me and expressed his emotional struggle, sharing that the inability to satisfy his wife was deeply painful for him. He emphasized the devastating impact it would have on him if he were to lose her, and earnestly asked for my assistance, acknowledging the difficulty of the situation. After a brief pause, I nodded in agreement. On Sunday, I invited Tom, Tanya, and 3 other couples over for a barbecue. And when the other couples left, Tom went into the study and played on my computer while Tanya and I went upstairs to my bedroom. By the time I had undressed, Tanya was lying on the bed with her legs spread wide and begging me to hurry up. After spending an hour together, Tanya glanced at me and commented that Peg had managed to escape consequences for her actions, expressing her disbelief and suggesting that Peg must be either crazy or stupid. I could sense that Tom understood Tanya's sensuality. Before parting ways, Tanya reluctantly distanced herself from me a 3rd time. I then accompanied both Tanya and Tom to the car, where Tom shook my hand and Tanya kissed me on the cheek. We all concurred that the day had been a success and discussed the possibility of repeating the experience soon. To an outsider, our conversation would have appeared to be about a barbecue. Monday afternoon, I met with John Abbott of the Cordless Agency, and handing me the report, he said, "Every time I do one of these things, I hope it's just a misunderstanding and that nothing is going on. But there's no doubt about it. Here, your fee also covers our appearance in court on your behalf, if what you decide to do goes to trial." I shook his hand, walked out of his office, and on the way home, I wasn't at all as pissed off as I thought I would be. Probably because I had already accepted that it was true, and by the time I got the report, I had it all sorted out in my mind. What am I going to do about this situation? Nothing that I hadn't already done. The only thing I had to do was to get the line of credit in place in time, so that Peg wouldn't find out about it until it was too late. I'll meet with a lawyer and get the paperwork done, but I won't file it until I'm ready. For the next 5 weeks, we met with Tom and Tanya 3 or 4 times a week, either at their place or mine. They started a rumor that I was going through a rough patch and that they were spending time with me, trying to cheer me up. Peg called me every week, but I stopped asking how she was feeling and when she was coming home. Finally, I'd had enough. I wrote checks on the line of credit, and as soon as they ran out, I found an apartment, moved out of the house, and served Peg with divorce papers. Instead of infidelity, they cited irreconcilable differences. I did this so that Peg wouldn't know I knew about White. She'll see it as my way of encouraging her to decide to come home. She'll call me, write some nonsense about me overreacting, and then probably suggest we meet somewhere for drinks and dinner, where she'll try to calm me down and talk some sense into me. I'll agree to meet her, listen to her, and then tell her I'll think about it. That will give me a few days to clear my line of credit and clear my checking and savings accounts. It went exactly as I had envisioned. First, she called me and told me I was being unreasonable, that there was no need to get lawyers involved. I told her I was tired of the neither fish nor fowl situation. You don't want to be with me, so it's time for me to accept that and move on. I agreed to meet her at Angelo's. It was the first time I'd seen her since she left me, and she looked good. I would miss her. Thunder strike me. I really do, because it was obvious to me that I still loved her. But even if she came back to me, I knew I could never live with her again. But I didn't tell her that. Instead, I sat there and listened to her feed me a line of bullshit. She's been seeing a shrink, and that shrink has been helping Peg understand, blah, blah, blah. And Peg is making good progress, and all she needs is a little more time. I know this is hard for you, baby, but it's hard for me too. Please, baby, just give me a little more time. I said I would think about it and let her know. I waited 2 days, and then called my attorney, and told him it was time to move on to step 2. He canceled the divorce papers and sent Peg a notice that the filing was canceled. Peg called me from work, thanked me, and told me I wouldn't regret it. I smiled, knowing I wouldn't regret it, but she didn't know why, but she would find out soon enough. That night, I joined Tom and Tanya for dinner. After the meal, Tanya and I retired to her bedroom, where she spread a blanket and expressed a desire to make love instead of just having closeness. She revealed that a home pregnancy test on Tuesday and a doctor's confirmation that afternoon confirmed she was pregnant, and I was going to be a father. Although our encounter was brief that night, it was a slow and enjoyable session. Afterward, I informed Tanya that I might not see her again soon, as I planned to conclude the situation with Peg and White that week, possibly requiring me to leave town for a while. Tanya urged me not to take any drastic actions, emphasizing the need for the baby's father to be around. Concerned, she speculated that my decision might be influenced by Tom's situation, and she urged me to think about it differently. Despite our recent closeness, she emphasized that just because she got what she wanted doesn't mean she doesn't still need me. The next day, Adam White, a member of the Fraternal Order of Eagles, attended the meeting and left in good spirits after discussing potential opportunities for advancement within the organization with influential members. In an equally good mood, he got out of the car in the parking lot of his house. He locked the car door, turned around, and felt a blinding pain before everything around him went black. He was found by a neighbor who called paramedics, and the paramedics who responded to the call took him to the emergency room at the hospital, where it was discovered that both of his arms and both of his legs were broken, and his genitals were damaged so severely that both of his testicles had to be removed. He was in great pain when he opened his eyes and saw that he was in a hospital room and found that he could not move. He had plaster casts on his arms and legs and was in traction. He saw Peggy standing next to his bed with a look of horror on her face before he passed out again. I wasn't present, but I received a detailed account of the events. A man entered the room, approached Peg, who stood near the bed and glanced at White. The man inquired if she was Margaret Olson, and upon her affirmative response, he handed her legal documents, informing her that she had been served. Opening the envelope, Peg discovered that she was being sued for divorce, citing infidelity as the grounds. As she read the word infidelity and observed the state of White on the bed in front of her, her face turned pale and fear overcame her expression. Realizing the implications, she exclaimed, "Oh my God!" before sitting down in a chair and breaking into tears. The police inquired about my whereabouts that night. It transpired that I was engaged in a poker game commencing an hour before the Eagles meeting, extending for an additional hour after White entered the hospital. Peg inadvertently provided an alibi, funding it without awareness. While the guys were willing to assist for free, I utilized Peg's credit as a gesture of gratitude. The Home Shopping Network obtained her Visa card number for the digital cameras gifted to Bill and Steve. eBay utilized her MasterCard for the laptop given to Mike, the 19-inch flat panel monitor for Phil, and even covered the cost of the aluminum baseball bat. I embarked on a 2-month vacation. Once the police were convinced of my innocence in White's misfortune, I ventured to Mexico for a fishing trip. Before departing, I instructed my lawyer not to press for a divorce, maintaining the status quo. I intended to stay married, yet distance myself from Peg unless she resisted. Weekly calls to Tom and Tanya revealed Peg's return home. True love seemed absent in Peg and White's equation, as she never reconciled with him after being served next to his hospital bed. With credit card bills arriving, Peg discovered empty savings and checking accounts, a tied-up line of credit, and fake CDs in the safe deposit box. Desperate to find me, she learned from my boss, who led her to believe I left abruptly without notice. Upon demanding an appointment with my attorney, Peg discovered I had severed ties. The divorce proceedings settled his fees, and he no longer represented me. Peg had no alternative. 4 months post my fishing departure, she declared bankruptcy, losing her house, and trading her Lexus for a used Geo. Upon my return from Mexico, I rented an apartment across town, avoiding places where she might spot me. Tanya, now 5 months pregnant, and even more alluring, and I resumed our relationship without concerns about being observed. 2 or 3 times a week, we spent nights at each other's places. Peg found out about my return 2 months later, and one day, waiting for me in the parking lot after work. Ignoring her, I drove away, and she followed. Eventually, I pulled into Bud's Grill Bar parking lot, intending to talk to her away from my workplace. Already at the bar ordering a Bud Light, I observed her entering, scanning the surroundings before spotting me and making her way over while mumbling something. When she reached me, I anticipated her actions, turning on the stool, catching her hand, and squeezing it firmly. I warned her not to provoke me too much, expressing my readiness to cause her pain. After releasing her wrist, I clarified that I wasn't running away, but moving slowly and carefully to ensure she could follow me. I emphasized that discussing her actions in the parking lot where I worked was inappropriate, as everyone there already knew about her behavior. I expressed my desire to talk to her. Peg insisted she didn't want to talk, demanding her money back. I questioned her about the money, asserting that she owed me for the house and that half of everything else was rightfully mine. I refused to give it to her, justifying my stance as compensation for the pain, suffering, and loss of marital rights I endured. I recounted the 1.5 years of abstinence while she was involved with someone else, highlighting the humiliation I faced as people viewed me as a deceived husband. I accused her of making me lose my parents' house, expressing frustration and resentment. I confronted Peg, expressing skepticism about the significance of the shared assets, given her decision to live with another man. When she demanded money, I firmly rejected her request, asserting that she had attempted to manipulate me, got caught, and faced the consequences. I informed her that the court would determine the division of property, but she wouldn't receive any money from me. I outlined a strategy for the legal proceedings, explaining that once she sued, I would countersue. I emphasized the ability of a skilled lawyer to prolong the case for 6 to 8 months, during which she would be paying her attorney. I questioned her financial ability to sustain legal fees without gaining anything. I claimed to possess sufficient evidence to defend my case in court, warning her that if I won, she would suffer the consequences. In a worst-case scenario for me, I described a scenario where I would agree to divide the assets but subsequently evade payment. I highlighted the impracticality of retrieving money from me, as I had no savings or checking accounts, a leased car, and lived in a furnished apartment. I underscored that the only recourse Peg and her lawyer would have with a judgment was to garnish my paycheck. However, I warned that if my paycheck was garnished, I would lose my job, leaving her with minimal financial gain after spending years on attorney fees. All that's left is to return to the judge and face the possibility of jail for contempt of court if I refuse to comply. I informed Peg that she could expect only a postcard from a small fishing village in Mexico where I would reside until my funds ran out. I acknowledged that thanks to her, I now had something else. I urged Peg to come to terms with the fact that she had manipulated me, been caught, and faced retaliation. I suggested she consider herself fortunate, especially when reflecting on the fate of her boyfriend. I emphasized that she could still be intimate with anyone, unlike her boyfriend who had lost his masculinity and could never be with another man's wife. When Peg accused me of having a hand in what happened to Adam, I pointed out the difference between perception and proof. I questioned her about the progress of her novel, noting that she hadn't seen Adam since the first day he was in the hospital. In response to her assertion that I took away the only thing he had, I sarcastically acknowledged his well-endowed nature and prowess as a lover. I suggested that if I had known she would eventually come back to me, the entire situation could have been avoided. I ended the conversation with a tone of regret, musing about the potential for a more joyful life if we had communicated better. Peg responded with irritation, labeling me an prick, to which I retorted that she was a worthless phony. I finished my beer, stood up, sang "Bless You," and walked out of the bar. 3 days later, I received divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences. I made no objection, and she received half of the marital assets, with an order for me to repay the borrowed money. I wished her luck and discarded the final decree. She must have believed my predictions because I never heard from her again. One interesting outcome emerged from this chaos. Everyone agreed White was a prick. Even pricks can have a friend or two, and one of them was Peggy's boss. He disliked how she treated White after his misfortune, so he let her go. Well, not exactly fired. The recession necessitated downsizing, and Peggy was downsized, though everyone knew she was fired. Unable to find work locally, she moved to California, where she had relatives. No one, not even her sister, has heard from her since. Plus, there is one more chapter to this story. It was a sad ending, but, at the same time, a glorious beginning. Tanya gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and Tom adored and spoiled her. Uncle Rob became a regular visitor, spending countless hours with little Martha. Tom never revealed the full story to Tanya and me. He knew the cause of his erectile dysfunction, but kept it hidden, even from Tanya. Cancer went untreated and spread. After his funeral, Tanya handed me an envelope. On it was written, "For Rob only." I looked at her, and she shrugged, saying, "I have no idea. It's addressed to you, so I don't know what's inside." I opened it and read, "Hey buddy, if you're reading this, I'm leaving. There was a reason I chose you. Yes, it was me, not Tanya, to be the father of our child. I knew I wouldn't be there for them, and I wanted someone I could trust to watch over them. I knew I could count on you. Don't let me down, brother. Take care of our girls." I held out the letter to Tanya, and she read it and cried. I hugged her for comfort, and she asked me what I was going to do. I would do exactly what he suggested, take care of my girls. 6 months later, Tanya and I got married.